Hello and welcome to UK Versus. Today I'm going down a bit of a rabbit hole, but it's not of my own volition this time. I have been set a challenge by Hitch, one of the creative team of UVS, who decided to call me out on Blue Sky, basically saying that I like my tinfoil hat theories, and I do love my tinfoil hat theories. So wanted to play 6 degrees of separation. Basically, he wanted to give me a word and said, "Go find the news." And yeah, that sounds like fun. It sounds like content. The main issue is the word was Stratford, and the only thing I know for Stratford is the place. So the first thing I did was immediately not to go from result bias. I went and looked for characters called Stratford. I looked for places in games called Stratford. I wanted to find anything other than the place Stratford that shows up in media that could be a UVS announcement. And unless worlds or regional or something is getting moved to Stratford, the only thing I can think of that relates to Stratford is the place. Now, whether that's a regionals being moved there, like I said, or worlds being moved there, but since we're playing 6 degrees of separation, the best thing to do is to look at famous events, famous people, or stuff that's happened in Stratford. And surprisingly, given the history of the UK and how long we've been a country and how deep every single place's lore is, the only thing I can find on Stratford, apart from sports stuff, is Shakespeare. So that's got to be it. It's the biggest thing to come out of Stratford. It's the biggest thing around Stratford. And if you were going to start off with 6 degrees of separation, you'd want this to be an easy connection. The main issue is once we get from Stratford to Shakespeare, we have a bit of an issue. There are 39 rough plays from comedies, historical pieces, and tragedies from Shakespeare that are so influential that even if it's not a direct adaptation of a Shakespeare play, a lot of the times it can be a interpretation of it that leads further and further down the line. So that is my first connection. I would say it would be to William Shakespeare and one of these plays or something to do with the man himself. Immediately, the hardest part of this is avoiding results bias. So results bias is where I want a result, so I will try to connect the dots to get to that result, regardless of what the evidence shows me. So the big thing for this was trying to avoid Record of Ragnarok. Now, the Record of Ragnarok is a fighting anime and manga where humanity's going to be destroyed if they cannot beat the gods in a fighting tournament. Doesn't sound very Shakespeare, but throughout this you get a lot of history lessons, and at one point Sir Arthur Conan Doyle quotes Shakespeare and we are cut to Shakespeare in the crowd. But that's immediately where my head went to, because I want a Record of Ragnarok challenger or set, and that's immediately where my head went to. But I fear that might be results bias because of how much I want it. So let's take a look at list of plays and let's see if we cannot draw anything from there. So you have The Tempest, you have The Merry Wives, you have A Comedy of Errors. That's a bit too easy. Merchant of Venice is a huge one. All's Well That Ends Well, Taming of the Shrew, Winter's Tale. In the historical sides, the historical ones have been so well adapted and changed over time. And then in tragedies, you've got the biggest and most famous ones: Romeo and Juliet, Macbeth, Julius Caesar, King Lear, Othello. It's a tough one. It's a very tough one. So not knowing much about fighting games and not knowing much about current media stuff. So if we're going down the lines of say Godzilla or those things, not my cup of tea. Haven't got a clue. But if we go to the anime side, if we're going to be adapting some animes, then there is a few things that I know and have been told by other people that I can go in there. Before I do move on to that, though, a big shout out to my friends who pointed out we could be looking at Nier Automata, which is a fighting game and anime. And the big thing about that is it locks in with Hamlet, one of Shakespeare's most famous plays, where you get to be or not to be. And the main character of Nier Automata is called to be. So that can quite easily fit in there and be a to be or not to be reference, linking it to Hamlet. There are other quite close comparison animes. One of my personal favorites and a favorite of a lot of the UK community that I get to talk to as well is Berserk. Berserk kind of has parallels with Macbeth. A lot of the betrayals, a lot of the stuff going on in the narrative. I won't spoil it even though it's so old, but there's a lot of Macbeth undertones in Berserk. And Berserk would make a hell of a set, but I don't think it can quite conform to the new 14 plus system we have in place. There are things like A Midsummer Night's Dream, which has been compared to ReZero starting over. It's very, very close in terms of plot lines. You got a lot of Fey interpretations done through the spirits. I think that's quite a good one. Another one that people are maybe going through result bias, because I know a lot of people have been talking about it, is you have King Lear, which parallels the story of Full Metal Alchemist, with the absentee father figures, the uprising, the overthrowing of a totalitarian state. King Lear and Full Metal Alchemist, so that's a good step. We go from Stratford to Shakespeare to King Lear to Full Metal Alchemist. And given that we're kind of on a nostalgia trend with the TMNT 80s stuff, and we're going a bit back to our roots with Street Fighter, it could be that we might see a Full Metal Alchemist set, because Full Metal Alchemist is consistently popular. It is one of those IPs that doesn't spoil. The story is so strong, similar to Shakespeare's plays, which are timeless and always going to be held in a good standing. Full Metal Alchemist, it joins that kind of crew. It could just be a straight Romeo and Juliet 2007 rip. It could also be, if you want to go really weird, get some live action Romeo and Juliet, Leonardo DiCaprio stuff from the early 2000s. That would be a hell of a one to go off. Other ones that kind of link in with the Shakespearean theme, we have Q. It's based on a Japanese smartphone game. It wouldn't be the easiest translation, as it's kind of more of a way of a simulation about training voice actors, but does force you to read Hamlet throughout the game, so it does have a very good distinctive link. You have the Ancient Magnus Bride. There's a lot of Shakespearean themes to it. It has a lot of ties in with other things like A Midsummer Night's Dream, and the way the main characters become demonized for their power is very reminiscent of a lot of Shakespeare's Rise and Fall. In live action sides, I would love to see a Doctor Who librarians kind of thing. The ones that have done Shakespearean stuff or works of literature before. If we're going down the works of literature line, we could see a Moriarty the Patriot kind of aspect. But to me, the one that again, this might just be my result bias going. One that's been going for a while, one that's very strong, one that's very popular, one that has a very big depth of what you can pull from the IP would be Fate Zero. Fate Zero has had Shakespeare as a character, it has lots of Shakespearean references, it has a lot of depth into betrayal, comedy, tragedy, historical references. If we're looking at not only underlining tones, themes of plays, and the way that it works, Fate Zero and Record of Ragnarok are all comedies that center on tragedies and have historical references, to which Record of Ragnarok is a bit more historically accurate, but Fate Zero is absolute beast. It has such a depth of what can be done, and the characters, the range of characters. I think Fate Zero would be a great way to go. It's very interesting. It's definitely very interesting, and there's definitely things I may have missed from other comparisons. If you do know any fighting games, if you do know any relevant upcoming media that's popular on Reddit and has been making great strides, do let me know, because this is a mystery I would love to get on top of. But for me, I'm focusing at this point in my degrees of trying to find a anime or fighting game or IP that links to Shakespeare. I think that is the right lines to go down. I think that is the best way to go. And looking at things like Full Metal Alchemist, Record of Ragnarok, Fate Zero, I've discounted things that are a bit older, although popular, and don't really have that conflict aspect to them, like Toradora doesn't really have what I'm looking for. The Romeo and Juliet series from 2007, maybe not. Nagi no Asakura, possibly not. Blade of Tempest, maybe, but usually I only look like within 5 years, but it's with the TMNT stuff, with the Street Fighter 6 stuff, the fact we're going further and further back, the fact we're kind of having this nostalgia hit, it's very interesting. I think I'm on the ball with the Shakespeare. I think it's all on board with how to that is linked to one of the plays. As much as I'd like to make a comedy of errors joke, because that is way too easy, I think the King Lear aspects of Full Metal Alchemist is a great way to go. But is that where it stops, or does it go even further? Should I be looking at voice actors that are linked to new up and coming new stuff? That is a good way to go. If anyone has any other ideas, if anyone has any other clues, if anyone has any other inklings, because I would love to get some more input as to animes or fighting games that are linked to either Stratford or Shakespeare or one of Shakespeare's plays. Let me know. We can, if we work together, solve this. But I think I'm on the right lines. I'll catch you on the next one. And Hitch, if you see this, I'm currently stumped. So if you could chuck me down a little clue to make sure I'm on the right lines, or that's if I'm not, try and get me back on the right lines, or what a bit of a clue towards the next step is, that would be great. I'll catch you on the next one. Have yourselves a great day. Bye.